Welcome everyone to enterprise.expert. This is April 2017 episode, and today's episode is lesser known QuickBooks Enterprise or desktop QuickBooks Desktop tips and tricks. And then as I was going through this, I noticed that maybe I may not have an hour to to cover everything. So this will be part one, and so I'll be making a couple of lesser known QuickBooks Enterprise tips and tricks videos, webinars, and today we'll focus 100% on company preferences. So we're going to spend about 5 minutes on the introduction, then we'll spend about 45 to 50 minutes on the content, on the demonstration, and then we'll leave the last 5 minutes for Q&A. So this should take about 1 hour. Now, who is Enterprise.expert? It's a community of experts in enterprise level technology. We communicate or engage in this webinar series that some of you are attending live, and some of you will watch the video later on in YouTube through their website or our blog, which is enterprise.expert, no www, no.com, and our Facebook group. So if you want to share enterprise level technology knowledge or have questions about it, strongly recommend that you join the Facebook group and engage with the other community members there. Now, behind the name, what we wanted to focus on is enterprise level technology. So enterprise, to me, or to most people, it's a little bit of the larger businesses, the medium-sized businesses, the ones that already are well established, that they rely heavily on technology to run their operations. And by technology, we are focusing on everything: hardware, software, database systems, accounting systems, customer management systems, whatever it is. However, we have a strong focus on QuickBooks Enterprise now, and as we finished covering QuickBooks Enterprise A through Z, we're going to start moving into all those other technologies. And by expert, it's pretty much anyone that's a community member that is willing to share the experience or knowledge and can share those learnings to help anyone else out. Now, this webinar series is once per month, every third Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern Time. We may have special episodes with sponsored or collaborated content. We do not provide CPE or ACE, so this is not for continuing education for accountants. However, most of the attendees actually are accountants, and we have a strong focus on QuickBooks Enterprise. However, when we're completely finished with covering QuickBooks Enterprise A through Z, as I mentioned, we'll move on to other competing software and software that adds on to QuickBooks Enterprise, or things that are not related to QuickBooks at all. About myself, I'm Hector Garcia. I'm a CPA and a certified IT professional based out of Miami, Florida. I'm the CEO of our accounting firm, our technology firm called Active CPA. We focus on helping smaller to medium-sized businesses integrate accounting and technology in order to work most efficient. And we have a strategic partner in the Los Angeles area, which is Peter. So if you need someone in the East Coast, you can contact me. If you need somebody in the West Coast, just email me and I'll send you over to our West Coast partner. My email is hector@garciacpa.com. I'm usually pretty open to answering general emails as long as the question is answerable. I should be able to answer your question. Now, the topics for today are going to be these 8 company preferences that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about accounting preferences and what autofill journal entry memo means. We're going to talk about default classes. We'll talk about bills and automatically use discounts. I will discuss term discounts, anything that has to do with term discounts in both the bills and the customer side. We'll discuss the checking preferences and how that helps you do the data entry a lot faster. We'll talk about the desktop view, which is basically saving the current desktop. So every time you open QuickBooks, it shows up exactly as you saved it. We'll talk about finance charges. We'll do a little bit deep dive into how finance charges works in QuickBooks. Then we'll discuss probably the most important preference, which is the general preferences. And there's a whole bunch of things in there. And we're going to see how all these things help you work faster or save time. And we'll talk about the payments preference of undeposited funds and what happens when you enable and disable that. and then we'll finish with collection centers and other customer sales and customer preferences. Okay, so let's jump into the demo now. Let's start with the first preference, which is autofill general journal entry memo. So if I go to the edit menu and go to preferences, and in the accounting tab, I click on autofill memo in journal entries, and I select an account here, whatever account it is. Okay, and I start filling in my journal entry, and I type adjustment year end, whatever I want to type. Okay, I type in a memo, whether it's long or short or whatever, and then I go to my next line and I type in the memo copies automatically on each line. So no matter how many lines I do, you're going to see that the memo keeps copying down. Okay. Now, for some people, that's great. For some people, that's kind of an annoyance, right? So if you want that memo to keep copying down, then you want to make sure you have that checked in there, autofill general journal entry. If you don't want it, then you basically uncheck it. And then when you do a journal entry and you select a line, that memo will not copy. So that's basically what that preference is. Let's go to the next preference, and let me switch here to single user. So the next preference, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into something called default classes. Now that's very unique to QuickBooks Enterprise. So it's really, really important that you keep that in mind. Only QuickBooks Enterprise can do default classes. QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Premier, QuickBooks Accountant cannot do default classes. So that's going to be here under the edit menu, under preferences, and then where it says accounting, company preferences, and it says here assign classes to accounts, items, and names. So let me kind of walk you through how this works. So if I do assign classes through accounts, okay, and I select that and then I hit OK. When I go into my chart of accounts, so list chart of accounts, and then I click on any chart of accounts account that I want to create a default class for. Let's say we'll go here through the expenses, automobile and trucks, and then I'll hit edit. I will now have a default class. Let me just make sure on the expense side. There you go, car and truck expense. Let's say car lease. I'm going to right click on that, hit edit account, and then I'm going to have a class here, right? So the minute you turn on automatic classes for accounts, every single account is going to prompt you to have a class. So if I go to select a class for this, let's say for example track, and then I hit save and close. Next time I go write a check or create a bill or enter a debit card transaction, whatever, for this account, you will see that my class will automatically be filled out. Notice that? I'm going to show you. Again, I'm going to select another account, and I'm going to select this gas, for example, and see that my class is not automatically filled out. So if you want a class to automatically be filled out based on the expense account or the account, then you would have to have that setting. Now that works differently for items. So let me show you. If I were to create an invoice, okay? So if I'm going to go to create an invoice, and then I'll select a customer here and select an item code, whatever it is, see my class is not automatically filled out, okay? Because I told it to automatically fill out classes based on accounts, not based on items. So if for me it's more important to automatically do classes based on items, not on accounts, then I have to change that setting, okay? So I'm going to do edit, preferences, and then I'm going to go into company preferences and then switch that, assign classes to items instead of accounts. So I'm going to switch it to items, and then I hit OK. And then let me go into one of these items. So I'll pick one of these items at random, and I'm going to edit the item. And notice that now the item has a class drop down. Now I really wish this setting was open for all of them, and then I could just do both classes and items, but it doesn't let you. You have to pick one or the other. So let's say, for example, for this one in particular, I'm going to select a default class, right? So the item itself has a default class. So next time I use this item, and let me just copy it here so I can do it here. So next time I use this item, I select the item, and let me just go to, okay, there you go. Select the item. Notice, focus on this area here, the class column. I'm gonna click on the item, and then the class gets automatically filled out. So if you think you're gonna be using a lot of classes for items, and you want to have the items setting there. If you think that you need classes for expenses, then or chart of accounts, then you want to have it on the accounts setting. But the strangest one is the one for names. So let me show you how that works. So let's say, for example, I'm going to go into one of my vendors here, and I'm going to select one of these vendors, whatever it is. Let's say this one, CISO's Lockworks. Let me go into it, and I'm going to enable it so I can also select a default class per name. So let me get out of here, go to the edit menu, preferences, go to company preferences, and then switch it to be names. So we'll do that, and then we'll hit OK. And then I'll go back and edit that vendor. And then somewhere here, I'm going to have default class. Somewhere. Where are you? Right here. Under additional info, you're going to see class. So let's say, for example, for this vendor, this is always going to be this accessories class. So I'm going to hit OK. So then when I go, let's say, for example, create a bill, the typical thing that we do for a vendor. So let's go into vendors, enter bill, and then I'll pick CISO's Lockworks. You see here where it says class, it automatically classifies the general transaction. Now, the tricky thing about this is that this class is for the general transaction, not for the individual items down here. So if I were to select one of these expense categories here, the class will automatically fill down here, but I can still change it, by the way. So I can change the class down here, but keep it for the general transaction, which could be an issue because it causes a lot of confusion. So as long as you have this class match that class, typically shouldn't be such a problem. But since we didn't turn on the feature on the accounts, it doesn't really matter which account I use. I can use any account. Doesn't matter what account I use. See, I select any account that I want, and I'm just going down the line picking random accounts. Notice that accessory class automatically fills in there. That is based on that setting. So I just kind of wanted to go deep dive into that. And by the way, we can't choose both items, accounts, and names. We can't mix it. We can only pick one of the three. Okay. All right. And it's okay if something comes in automatically and you change it later. This is just for the defaulting. Okay, perfect. So let's go to the next preference. Let's go to the edit menu and go to preferences. And then we already did the accounting preference. So let's go down to bills. And then there's one little setting here called automatically use discounts. So in order for me to explain that setting, I have to explain term discounts for some of the folks that maybe don't understand term discounts. But I'm going to go ahead and do automatically use discounts, and then I'll leave whatever account is in there. That's fine. And then we'll hit OK. And I'm going to kind of tell you how term discounts work. But I'm going to start by showing you how terms discount works with a customer before we run into the vendor, because with the customer, it actually makes a lot more sense because we can control it a lot better. So let's go into the customers menu and create an invoice. And then I'll select a random customer here. And then I'll pick an item, whatever item I want. And I'm going to make this $5,000, okay? But I'm going to make these terms 2%, 10, net 30. And let me just tell you what the construction of these is. So I'm going to go to add new, and then I'm going to tell it, let's do a 3% discount. And we'll say, if you pay this invoice within 30 days, but not early, you pay full amount. But if you pay earlier than 30 days, let's say you pay within 5 days, you would get a 3% discount. Okay, that's what all these things mean. So the 30 is your regular aging days, and the 5 days is when the discount enables. So I'm going to put 3%, 5 days, 30 net, something like that, right? So there's no naming convention. It doesn't have to match what's there already. But as long as you explain to the customer, hey, there's a way for you to get a discount. If you don't get the discount, then you have to pay within 30 days. So we'll hit OK. And then we'll bring this invoice back, let's say 4 days. Okay. So basically, if I receive a payment within 5 days of this date, the QuickBooks will suggest for me to take 3% discount. So let's see how that works. Let me hit save, and then let me go to receive payment, and I can click on receive payment from the invoice, or I can go into customers, receive payment. Either one works. Okay. So notice that down here it says this customer has discounts available, apply discounts, credits to apply. Now this doesn't happen automatically. So there's no setting for QuickBooks to automatically give a customer a discount. And the reason for that is because the customer pays you. So you have to wait until you get paid from the customer to know exactly how much money you received before you can apply a discount, which is different than when we work with vendors. When we pay a discount with vendors, it works a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about the discounts on bills afterwards, but I'm talking about customers just for the context so we understand how the discounts work. So right now, we have not applied discounts for the customers yet. I'm going to have to go into discounts and credits. And then on the discounts tab, it's actually suggesting it, saying, hey, if you pay by the 17th, and that's what that number says there. Okay, so that takes the current invoice date, which is the 12th, adds 17 days to it. So if you pay by the 17th, we suggest to get a $150 discount. Okay, that's what that means. Now let me hit cancel for a second. So that's based on the date of the computer and the date of the invoice. Okay, so but if you were to receive a payment, let's say after the 17th, and then you were to apply a credit, notice that I changed the actual customer receipt date and I put it in the future, and now it's no longer suggesting a discount. So as long as you do a receive payment and that date falls within those 5 days, QuickBooks will automatically calculate that discount for you, but it won't automatically apply it. You still have to click on the button, go in the screen and confirm it, and then we hit done, and then you can see the discount gets applied in here, and then it becomes $48.50, and then hopefully that's how much my customer pay me, and then I can hit save and close. So that's how the discounts work. Now once you look at the invoice itself, and I'm looking at the invoice, it says paid. Nowhere there it says that the client received a discount, which is kind of a problem. There's no report I can pull out to tell me, hey, which invoice has got a discount. I really can't tell that. But in this same screen, if I hit Control H for history, I'm going to see there's one line item for discount and one line item for payment. So I'll be able to see it on the Control H screen, on the history screen, but I can't really see it on a report. Okay. Now, if I click on the transactions tab, that 150 shows up as a payment. So unfortunately, it doesn't say discount on this screen. You will literally have to click on it and see it, and then see down here that it says discount. Okay. So that's customers' term discounts. Let's move on to vendor discount, which was really the context in which we started talking about this. I turn on the preference. Again, let me just make sure that we don't lose track of this. We turn on this preference here called automatically use discount. So in this case, it's different. In this case, when I go pay a bill that gets the discount, QuickBooks will pre-calculate it for me before writing a check. So let's go into vendors, enter bills, and then we'll enter a bill here for whatever vendor, and then we'll pick whatever account we want. To pick a real account, and then we'll put here, say $7,000. And I'm going to put terms 30%, 5 days. So the terms on the customer side are the same terms we have on the customers, and vendors share the same terms. You can use some of them just for vendors and some of them just for customers, but they share the same terms database. Anyway, so I'm creating this bill. I'm going to backdate this a couple of days, and then I'm going to hit save and close. Then I'm going to go to vendors, pay bills, and then I'll select the bill. And as long as, again, I'm within those 30 days, notice that right here it says City of Bayshore terms suggested discounts 210. But that preference that said automatically apply it, that's showing up here. See, I didn't have to press a button for QuickBooks to calculate what my net check is supposed to be. It's prompting me. It's prompting me to get that discount right away. But if I click on set discount, I can then change it. So if for whatever reason QuickBooks calculated the 210 wrong, I can change that discount accordingly. Let's say you have a manual conversation with someone on the phone and say, look, you can only take 150 discount, whatever. Then you can just change it here. And then once you hit OK, my amount due to pay will change as well. But typically you want to accept what QuickBooks does for you automatically, because that was the point of that preference. So even if you don't have that preference turned on, you can always set the discount manually. But when it is turned on, QuickBooks will basically let you know that you're within that discount period. Now, one thing that QuickBooks does not have, and people request all the time, is a report of bills and their discount date. So, a report that tells me all the bills that I should pay and by when I should pay to enjoy that discount. QuickBooks doesn't have such a thing. So unfortunately, not something that that QuickBooks has. I would love that, but that isn't there. I could try to see if somehow I can construct it, but I don't think I ever seen it anyway. All right, so that's that preference. Let's go to the next topic here. Let's go to edit preferences, and then we'll go into checking. Now, in the checking preferences, people don't think there's a lot of importance here, but I think there's one small setting that would really speed up your data entry. If you usually write a check from the same bank account, or usually write checks from the same bank account, I suggest that you set your default bank account here. So we go into the checking preferences and then my preferences, and then you set your default checking account, whatever it is, assuming you have multiple accounts. And then under company preferences, there's a little checkbox that says start with payee field check. Now that's not a default preference, so I'm going to uncheck it to show you what it means. I'm going to uncheck it and hit OK. So every time I go write a check, my cursor starts at the bank account. So I literally have to either move my mouse back to payee, or I have to hit tab, tab, tab to go down to payee. So if I write a lot of checks and I want to do fast data entry, and I typically don't change my bank account, let's say very rarely I change my bank account, then what I want to do is turn on that preference that says start with payee field. Let me show you how neat this is. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to click on write checks, and then I go straight into payee. So then I can start typing my payee and then move forward from there. So that's a really, really important one. And then obviously the number system, if I have to go back and change that, that would be a manual process. But if my numbers sequence is good and my date preferences, which we'll talk about briefly, it's on the right setting, then every time you go write a check, it goes straight into the payee tab. So I think, again, little things that people usually don't talk too much about. Now, the other thing is certain payees like AT&T, utility companies, certain vendors require to have specific things written in the memo. Okay, so right here it says memo, and a lot of times people are writing these things by hand. So if every check that you write to a vendor requires to have something very specific on the memo every single time, what you want to do is you want to go into the vendor. So go to vendors, vendor center. So go into the actual vendor you want to change. So let's say, for example, this one, automobile insurance company. I'm going to double click on that and then go into additional info. Oops, not additional info. payment settings. I'm gonna go to payment settings, and here where it says account info, I can type in a whole bunch of stuff. Now it's pretty long. Look at this. I'm just typing stuff at random. It's pretty long. I haven't counted those characters, but I'm gonna guess that's like 80 characters. So that's quite a bit. Okay. So if there's any instructions you need to put in a memo for a vendor, you want to type it where it says account number. So if you want to put apply, 50% to Hector Garcia and 50% to Steve Smith, whatever instructions need to go every single time you write a check to that vendor, you just put it there where it says account number. And then when I hit OK, I'm going to go to the edit preferences. And then under the checking preferences, I'm going to go to company preferences. And then the settings here somewhere. Where are you? Did I miss it? It's here somewhere. Okay, right here. Autofill payee account number in check memo. That's the setting there. So autofill payee account number in the check memo. Okay, so once you click that and then hit OK, and then I'm going to go ahead and write a check. Notice that memo automatically fills in. So that's actually killer. And a lot of people don't even know that they can put something else other than an actual account number. And a lot of folks that I know that didn't even know that that this was possible. So that's actually really, really good. Now, in contrast, if I were to create a bill, this is a very interesting one. If I were to create a bill for that same vendor, and let's say I create a bill here, the memo field doesn't get filled on the bill itself. So if I put something else in here, okay, I put some numbers, and then I put, some, let's say something that has, any sort of significant information to the bill, but I didn't put anything that had to do with payee instructions. That memo is actually completely independent from the check itself. So notice that I put one memo there, and this is one set of information, and then I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to pay this bill now. Let me show you. I'm going to pay this bill, and then I'll click on pay selected bills. Okay, and then I'll show you real quick that bill payment. Let me do a search for that bill payment. Actually, it should be right here. There it is. That memo did show up on the bill payment. So although it won't show up on the bill, but as long as that setting it's on, that will come in on the bill payment itself. Okay, perfect. So let's go to another preference, edit preferences. And then under checking, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover in here. Yep. I mean, there's obviously other things in there, but I wasn't planning to cover anything else in there. Okay, so let's go into desktop view. This is something I really, really like. In desktop view, we can turn off the home page from automatically popping up. I like doing that because I'm a power user, so I don't need to be seeing the home page. Also, I like the colored icons in the top because I'm actually not a big fan of that left icon bar. I like the top icon bar. I'm a little bit old school from that perspective. But then these settings are really good. Here it says desktop. Save desktop when closing. Don't save desktop. Save current desktop. So for example, in this case, which I have a completely blank and naked desktop, I will do save current desktop and then hit OK. And then basically every time I open QuickBooks, it will open just like this. But let's say, for example, I wanted to open with the P&L and the balance sheet at the same time. So let's say I'm going to pull up my P&L, and then I'm going to pull up my balance sheet, and then I'm going to do window tile vertically. It's actually something I love to do, is seeing my P&L and balance sheet next to each other like this. Maybe I'll change the report settings on this one. And let's say, for example, I want this to show up every single time I open my QuickBooks. I'm going to go at this point, I'll go to edit preferences, and then I click on save current desktop and hit OK. And now every time I open QuickBooks, it will pop up like this. Okay. So, and with anything else that I have open, so that's also something that's really good to have. Something else that people, so now that we're talking about open windows, so something else that people don't think too much about, and I'm just kind of opening a bunch of things. Okay. So I have all these things open here. Okay. Now, if I go to window, close all, that will close all the open windows for me. But there's a shortcut that a lot of people don't use, which is WA. Now, you see that the word window has a little underline under W, and then the word all has an underline under the A. So if I do Alt WA, let me show you. So I'm doing, you can't see my hands, but Alt WA, that will close everything that's open. And of course, if there's a customized report, it will warn you on that. But if you have a whole bunch of screens open, that becomes really useful as well. Something that a lot of people don't think about too much. Okay, so that's that preference, which save the current desktop. And by the way, when I was talking about the colored icon bars, I was talking about the top icon bar here with the colored icon. So this is actually the way I like to work. I'm a little bit used to sort of the old setting. This was changed in 2013, but I've been using QuickBooks since 2002. And whenever they changed that top bar, I kind of got stuck with that view. So this is how I like to see it. Okay, so let's go to the next preference here that we're going to cover is finance charge. And we'll do a little bit of a deep dive on finance charge because this is definitely one of those lesser known areas. So I'm going to go to finance charge and then company preferences. And then I want to start with annual interest rate. Now, just to simplify things, I'm going to use 12%. That way it's approximately 1% per month. And then the minimum finance charge here, I'm going to put here $25. And then I'm going to leave the grace period at 30. And then I'm also going to leave the due date to be what we use for finance charges. And then here it says assess finance charges on overdue finance charges. I wouldn't recommend this. This is a huge mess. So I would uncheck that. Normally, I would just recommend that. I uncheck that, and then I'll hit OK. So let me show you how finance charges work. So let me create an invoice, and I'll create a new customer. We're going to call this bad customer. So I'll create a new customer, and then I'll do an invoice that's, let's say, 2 months old. And the terms is due on receipt. So this is definitely an overdue invoice. And let me put an amount here, and then we'll put $10,000. Okay, so there's my invoice for $10,000, and that's almost 2 months old. So that should apply for a finance charge. Now, finance charges are done in batches. So this is technically the only overdue invoice I have. As a matter of fact, let's go into our reports, customers and receivables, and let's take a look at our overdue invoices here. Let's see what we got. Okay, so yeah, so there's 2 overdue invoices here, right, on my collections report. So only these 2 invoices should apply finance charges to. So let's go into customers and assess finance charges. Now remember that we changed our percentage setting in the preferences. However, in here, where it says settings, we can go straight into that preference straight from here. So if I select, let's say, this one right here, bad customer, this is going to apply a finance charge, like I said, approximately 1% per month. And this is calculating it based on the assessment date. So if the assessment date is a different number, a different date. Now in this case, it's using today's date, but it's a different date. It will calculate the finance charge with a different number. So notice that as I click in and out, select these dates, the finance charge starts changing. So it's all based on the assessment date, and the assessment date is the official date in which it starts calculating that finance charge. Now, let's say, for example, I were to go back and do, let's say, November, something like that. Yeah, there we go. That's finance charge of 100. Let me go back even further to, let's say, the 21st. Notice that goes away. Now, the reason why that goes away, it's because that as of October 21st, that invoice was not late. So let's say as of technically, let's look at that invoice. Give me a second. Okay, so the invoice is October 1st and it's due on receipt. So technically that's late October 2nd. Okay, so October 2nd, let me just put here, is not assessing a finance charge. The reason for that is because we also have a grace period. So I'm going to click on setting, and then see where it says grace period days. So if I put 0 grace period and then hit OK, then at that point, finance charge hits. So that's the interesting thing about this is we got the grace period, which is, how much after my due date I will not charge a finance charge. And then the minimum finance charge would be, if you don't get to 25, charge at least 25. Now, this is where the trick comes in. Let me just close out of this. I have a lot of clients that don't charge finance charges based on percentage. They charge just a flat amount. They just charge, look, if your invoice is late more than 30 days, I'll charge you $50. That's it. Okay. So the way that works and the way you would do that is just go to edit preferences, go to finance charge. On the annual interest rate, put 0 because we don't charge an interest rate. And on a minimum, we'll put 50. And then we'll put a grace period of 30 and then make sure that all of our invoices are due, in 30 days. And then at that point, it will start calculating from that due date. So let's hit OK. And let's go back into that invoice that we were playing with earlier. My bad customer's invoice here. Okay, so that's dated October, and then we'll give them 30 days here. So we got October, 30 days, and then we'll hit save. Okay, so there's my invoice for October, 30 days. Then when I go assess my finance charge, and this doesn't happen automatically, you have to click on assess finance charge. And then let's say, for example, we're now in November, which is basically a day late. This is going to charge a finance charge of $50. Okay, so not based on a percentage, not based on an interest rate, not based on an interest rate, just based on a flat dollar amount. And since I didn't have this preference here, we go back into that says assess finance charges on finance charges. Since I don't have this checked, then it won't charge $50 again on the late finance charge. But if you do want to charge also a $50 fee on the finance charge itself, separately, you would have that check mark. I'm saying this becomes a disaster in my opinion, so I wouldn't recommend to have this checked. And of course, you got the account here in which you want that finance charge to go into, where in your profit and loss you would like that finance charge to go into. Okay, let me take a quick break and read some questions here. So can I assess a finance charge each month, or does that double up on the finance charge each time I assess it? Right. So the finance charge, you can assess finance charges multiple times. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and assess this finance charge in November, and then I'll click assess charge. And then I'm going to go assess my finance charges for December. So when I go to customers, assess finance charge, and then I do my December one, notice it shows up again. Okay. So I'm going to go assess finance charge again. Okay. And then when I go into my customer, I see that there's 2 finance charges, one for November and one for December. So the only warning you will get is whether you're assessing finance charges to the same customer on the same day. But otherwise than that, you're more than welcome to assess multiple finance charges. So you're going to have a little bit of discipline around assessing charges and have a good policy around it and a good process in place, because QuickBooks is not really that powerful at tracking them, but it's pretty powerful at creating them. And the way finance charges work, they're just basically an invoice. It's just basically an invoice called finance charge using a finance charge template, but it's exactly like an invoice. It has terms. It's exactly like an invoice, and you can even modify it. I don't recommend you mess with an invoice. You can add items to it and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend you do this, but you're more than welcome to do so. So that's the only tricky part, is that finance charges are not locked. So you can actually turn a finance charge into an invoice, which becomes kind of messy. So it's really, really important that that is set in place. Now, another question here says, is that $50 per invoice? Yes, Wayne. Right now, I only had one invoice that was overdue, but it would charge per invoice. So that the finance charges are all based on invoices. Now, somebody says, in some states, you're not allowed to assess finance charges on top of finance charges because that would be double dipping. That makes sense. That's why I do not like to do finance charges on top of finance charges. But that's a good point. There could be state laws that prevent you or limit you on what finance charges you can charge. I would definitely look into that. But this is very common for like homeowners associations, things like that, where people always ask me how to do these type of things. Okay, so that's finance charges, and I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive, but I want to talk about other really useful preferences. So let me go into general, and we're going to spend a lot of time here. There's a lot of things here that are 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 not used correctly, or underused, or people don't even know that it's there. First thing I want to talk about is on this page, press enter moves between fields. So if you have a user that mistakenly hits enter every time they do something, and it saves the transaction, and it freaks people out because it saves and closes. If you hit that checkbox, enter will no longer save a transaction. Enter will basically be replaced as a tab. Okay. The other one is, hey, I remember that every time I did something, QuickBooks warned me, yes or no, right? So if for whatever reason, when QuickBooks gave me that warning and I put a check mark that says don't warn me again, or don't show this window again, and there isn't another way to bring it back, the only way to bring back these one-time messages, the ones that you put a little check mark that says don't ask me this again, is to click here where it says bring back all one-time messages. If I click that, bring back all one-time messages, and hit OK, all my one-time messages will show up. For example, when I try to close QuickBooks, it tells me, would you like to, are you sure you want to exit QuickBooks? And then, so it tells me yes or no. But if I click do not display this again and then hit yes, next time I try to close it, it will just close it automatically and not warn me. So that's actually, this is the most common one that people ask me for. They say, hey, I want to get that warning so I don't close QuickBooks by mistake. So that's what that little bring back all one-time messages helps you do. Now, the other one that's really interesting here is automatically place decimal point. And this is something I don't like. I like putting my own decimal point. But for people that have this check, let me show you what happens. When you go write a check or enter a bill or enter an item, whatever, and let's say, for example, the amount was 125.50. Now, I'm used to typing 125.50, okay? So if I put 125.50, it works just fine, no issues. Now, with the automatic decimal point, I can do 12550 tab, and it will put that decimal point for me. The problem is, if I put 125.5, which sometimes I do, I put 0.5 and then hit tab, that works fine. But if I put 1255, not the extra zero, and I hit tab, QuickBooks will place that decimal right before the 2 or the 5, which is not what I want. So that's what the automatic decimal point issue does. The other problem is if I don't have cents, let's say I'm going to pay $100, I type 100 and hit tab, QuickBooks will automatically convert that to $1 for me. So it's up to you. It depends on whether or not you are used to putting those decimal points there without the period. I personally like to put period for my decimals, but that's a setting that you're more than welcome to change. So that's what that one means, automatically place decimal point. Now, one before editing a transaction, I like that one that basically says, hey, if you change something that's already been saved from before, warn me that I'm changing a current transaction. I would always have that on. This automatically show drop-down list. Let me show you. If I uncheck that and hit OK, not sure if I like this, but what happens is here where it says pay the order off, if I start typing something, it doesn't give me that drop-down, the drop-down that comes out automatically to discover stuff. Now, if you're very precise, in your typing, for example, I know that this is a car lease and I type car lease. See, it just goes through it without actually showing that drop-down menu, telling you how close you are to getting to where you want to be. So I'm not sure if you're gonna want that. Now, if you want also for QuickBooks to detect part of the name. So for example, let's say I wanted to get to, let's say this account, registration and license, but I didn't know the first word, I just know the word license. If I type just LIC, it will show me just the word that has license and permits, but it won't show me that second option, because in QuickBooks 2017 they added the feature where you can type anything within the name, but you have to have this drop down list turned on. So let me hit OK and show you how that works. Now I'm going to type LIC, and notice it shows up the one that starts with LIC, and also anything else that has the word LIC in the account itself shows up as an option as well. So that drop-down menu is important, especially if you want to take advantage of that new feature they added on QuickBooks 2017. Okay, perfect. So let's go into Edit, Preferences. And now let's discuss this one. Automatically remember account or transaction information. Now, this was tricky. So let me start with automatically recall last transaction for the name. So we're going to select this one, automatically recall last transaction. I'm not a fan of this one, but some people are. I'm going to go into the check register, and then I'm going to create a transaction. Okay, so I'm going to create a transaction here, 500, and then put a category. So everything got I put here 500, $50, and I put the category utilities, and then I have a memo here. If I'm going to change the memo, I'm going to put here internet, whatever. Okay, so there's my transaction. Okay, next time I create a transaction, let me show you for Comcast, everything is typed for me. The memo that I put last time, and that actually overwrites that automatically account fill payee that we talked about earlier. So that's why I don't like this feature. It puts the account, and it also puts the dollar amount. The reason why I hate this is because most people don't have the discipline to look at these things, and they press enter and they keep creating duplicate transactions. So I actually don't like that idea. I like the other setting, which is pre-fill accounts based on past entries, but it won't enter the dollar amount. It will only enter the account. So if I type here Comcast, notice that my utilities get automatically filled, but my dollar amount did not. And that's, to me, that's really important. So that setting there, I find it to be extremely powerful. So the difference in a nutshell is if I do automatically recall, it would bring the last memo I used, and it will bring the last dollar amount I used. If I do pre-fill, it will only bring in the last account that I used. Now, this pre-fill gets overwritten by any default account. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I go into my vendor center and I go to Comcast and I go edit my vendor and I go to account settings and I change my pre-fill, let's say to computers, let's say computer repairs. So I'm forcing QuickBooks to use computer repairs as a default expense category for that vendor. When I go in the register and I type Comcast, this is actually going to put the one that I just told it to be the all overriding factor. So even though I told it to recall the last one that we used, for this particular vendor, it won't recall at all because I had forced it. So for the vendors that probably you didn't set an automatic account in there, let's say here, automobile insurance company, it won't put anything, okay, because maybe it doesn't have enough transactions going into it. So I didn't give it a default one. But if I were to give it a default one, it would use the default or use the last one used. But let's say, for example, I'm going to go ahead and use a category for this transaction. And then I'll use it again. And I'll use it again. And you have to use it 3 times for QuickBooks to now know that the default account for that vendor, remember, I didn't override it. This is just based on history. Okay, so now when I do it the 4th time, it should fill it automatically. I'm not sure why I didn't do it. Let me do one more time here. Okay, now it fills it automatically. So if again, let's go back to what these preferences are. So automatically recall will do the exact same thing that you did on the last transaction. Pre-fill on last entry will pre-fill only the expense category matching to that vendor if I don't have an overriding account in the preferences. And if I have a vendor that I use for with multiple expense categories, I have to use it at least 3 times in a row in order for QuickBooks to go, okay, this is now my new default expense account for that category, for that vendor. So when I use it a 4th time, it will show up. So that's the difference between these two. The other one here are the dating preferences. So we have use last entered date and we have today's date. So last entered date is what I have now. When I go create a new entry, a new check, a new invoice, notice that this will use the last date that I used. However, if I tell it to use today's date, and I switch it here to today's date, and this is a sample file that's going to be based on December 15th. If I tell it to use today's date, I'm going to get out of it and go to the register again. It's going to default to what today's date is on your computer. In this case, a sample file, which is always December 15th. So if I go create an invoice, it will start with today's date. If I go write a check, it will start with today's date. Really, really important. But if I select use last enter date, and I go write a check, for example, notice that the default date that shows up is the last one that I used on any transaction. So that's extremely important to know, because if you're going to be entering a year's worth of transaction and you're going to go start with January of, let's say, 2016, and then go down the road, you want to use last enter date, because the probabilities are that you're going to have dates that are really close to each other. But once you're done entering historical data and you're working on, let's say, real-time data, I want QuickBooks to default to today's date, not the last date that was used. Okay, so these are the two general preferences that we have there. The last one that I'll talk to you about, and we'll wrap things up because it's already top of the hour, is this one here called always show 4-digit years. Now, that to me is extremely important to turn off, and I'll tell you why. See where it says always show 2-digit years? For every screen, a check, an invoice, this is not a problem, okay? Because the date field, it's big enough. But for whatever kooky reason, the programmers over into it didn't feel that it was valuable to add literally like 1/10 of an inch to this date column in the check register. And I work a lot with the check register. So what happens is if I go edit any transaction, notice that when I select it, it truncates my date. Notice that I actually have to literally wait for that tooltip to show up to tell me what date is, or I have to kind of scroll to the right or hit the right arrow to be able to get the whole date in there. So unfortunately, if you're working with a register quite a bit and you are kind of frustrated that you can't see that date, that could be a quick solution for you. If you go to click on always show years, and that basically or only show 2-digit years, and then you hit OK. Notice what happens when I go in my register. It only shows 2-digit years, and even if I go try to edit it, it doesn't truncate it for me. So it's still accessible. The whole date is accessible for me to see. So I know it's a little tiny issue, but for me, it's a big deal, right? Because I just don't like. I think it spend way too much time, kind of playing with it, trying to get my full date in there. All right, so I actually couldn't get to everything I wanted to get to. We still had to discuss payments and sales and customers. So maybe we'll leave it for the next session. And then let me talk about next month's episode. And this one takes a long time to prepare for, so I need to make sure this is high value for you. We still have 133 people on the line. So if you think it is worth it for us to do a deep dive into user permissions in QuickBooks Enterprise, just put in the questions box yes. Or if you put no, then I'll think about maybe some other area that I can do a deep dive on. But user permissions is something that it actually takes a lot of prep work, because you have to do a lot of testing to kind of show you what one thing does and what the other does. Okay, good. All right, so only 2 people said no, and like 50 people said yes. So I'll go with that. All right. So if you are if you are registered for this, you will automatically get the link. It would be on the 17th of May. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to watch it live, go to enterprise.expert. Last thing is, I'd like to know if you are a QuickBooks Enterprise reseller already. And if you are, then you probably won't be hearing from me. But if you're not, I will contact you and kind of let you know if you are going to get into selling QuickBooks Enterprise. I would love to help you, just because that's the idea behind doing all these webinars, that we let people know what QuickBooks Enterprise can do, and maybe present an opportunity for selling. So If you let me know whether or not you're interested, I'll send you a quick email with the information and we can discuss it even further. Now we have 4 other webinars coming on the next month. We have one today in the afternoon, 4 o'clock my time, which is called the Small Business Power Hour. This will be the first of the series, and we'll talk about marketing. So we'll see how many people are interested or learning from me about marketing strategy and marketing tactics. And let me go ahead and close the poll so I can show you on the screen. There it is. So there's a webinar today at 4 o'clock my time Eastern on marketing strategy versus marketing tactics. If you're interested, go to hectorgarcia.com /webinars. Let me go ahead and copy and paste it into the chat box. Make it easier for you guys to click on it. So I'm going to put it in the chat, in the general chat. I'm pasting that link in there. Okay. So if you want to register for that, go ahead and register. Then I'll see you this afternoon in a couple hours. Tomorrow, we have QB Power Hour, which will be on QuickBooks Online Accountant Practice Management. It's a new feature. This is an exclusive from Intuit. Intuit hasn't released much information about the new practice management tool for accountants. So if you are an accountant and you use QuickBooks Online, I think you're going to like that tool. We're going to showcase that tomorrow at 12 p.m. my time. And then next month in May, we're going to do Tax Power Hour with my friend Heather. I invited her as a guest. And we're going to talk about depreciation, expenses, Section 179, and something called an asset analysis that we do a cost segregation study to see whether there are potential tax savings from the purchase of a property. So that will all be about tax. And then that same day at 2 p.m. on May 4th? Yeah, on May, that's actually May 5th. Sorry about that. I gave you the wrong date. It's May 5th. So on May 5th of next month, wait, hang on a second. What am I talking about? May 3rd. Whoops, sorry. I guess I'm a little tired from tax season here. These are both May 3rd, not May 4th. May 4th is my anniversary. I turned 10 years married with my wife. I think she would kill me if I'd be doing a webinar on May 4th. So May 3rd, we'll do at 12 p.m. expenses versus depreciable assets. And then at 2 p.m. we'll do Excel. We'll bring back Excel Power Hour. And we'll talk about text commands in Excel, which are used to clean up data. All right. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. And if you're joining me this afternoon at 4 p.m., I'll see you in a couple of hours. 4 p.m. my time. That's 1 p.m. Western. I mean, West Coast. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for attending Enterprise Expert. Join the Facebook group. Just search Enterprise Expert in the Facebook group. Continue the conversation. Ask the questions. Share your knowledge. Check out the website and email me if you ever have any QuickBooks Enterprise or general enterprise technology questions. And again, if the question is answerable, I will answer it. If it's really complicated, then I'll probably tell you that we have to set up some sort of private consultation. Anyway, thank you very much for attending and have a wonderful day.